You are in the middle of a conversation. Someone is telling you about a problem they have been dealing with for 3 days, 3 weeks, maybe 3 years. You listen, or at least you think you are listening. Then they pause, and you take the opening. You tell them about the time the exact same thing happened to you. Then you explain what you did. Then you explain why your way worked. Then somehow, 10 minutes later, the conversation is no longer about them, it is about you. You did not necessarily plan it. You may not even have noticed it. And if someone pointed it out, you might immediately defend yourself. I was just trying to relate. I was trying to help. I was only giving my opinion. Maybe that is true. But here is the uncomfortable question. What if you are not as interested in other people as you think you are? And what if the problem is not that you talk about yourself sometimes? What if the problem is what happens when somebody else tries to take the emotional center of the room? There is a simple test you can perform without a therapist, without a personality test, and without somebody else telling you what kind of person you are. It costs nothing, it takes less than 5 minutes, and it requires something much harder than admitting that you have flaws. It requires you to watch yourself without defending yourself. Do not ask, "Am I a narcissist?" Ask a more uncomfortable question. What do I do when I am not the most important person in the room? Because you can be confident without being narcissistic. You can enjoy talking about yourself without being narcissistic. You can have ambition, pride, strong opinions, and even a large ego without having narcissistic personality disorder. But if you repeatedly need conversations, relationships, criticism, rules, and other people's emotions to bend around your sense of importance, then there is something worth examining. And the signs are often much quieter than people think. My name is not important here. Your name is. Because this is not about labeling somebody else. It is about what happens when you turn the question toward yourself. Most people are very good at identifying narcissistic behavior in other people. They see the manipulator. They see the arrogant coworker. They see the friend who always makes everything about themselves. They see the partner who never apologizes. They see it immediately. But ask those same people to examine their own behavior, and suddenly everything becomes complicated. There was a reason. There was context. Someone else started it. Someone else was being unreasonable. Someone else hurt them first. That is why self-evaluation is so difficult. You are not examining a stranger. You are examining the person whose behavior you have spent your entire life explaining, yourself. By the end of this, you will have 5 behaviors to watch for in yourself, not 5 reasons to diagnose yourself. 5 patterns that can tell you something important about how you handle attention, superiority, criticism, rules, responsibility, and shame. And there is one pattern near the end that is particularly uncomfortable because it can make narcissistic behavior look like confidence on the outside while something much more painful is happening underneath. I am going to show you where the blame shifting can come from. I am going to show you why criticism can feel like an attack. And I am going to show you why worrying that you might be narcissistic is not, by itself, evidence that you are one. Stay with me. Narcissism is not simply loving yourself. That is the first thing you need to get rid of. Taking pride in your work is not automatically narcissism. Talking about your achievements is not automatically narcissism. Having dreams is not narcissism. Wanting recognition is not narcissism. The problem begins when your sense of importance repeatedly requires other people to become less important. That is the distinction. And once you understand that, ordinary moments suddenly become useful evidence. Think about the last argument you had. Who needed to be right? Think about the last time somebody criticized you. Did you become curious, or did you immediately build a case against the person criticizing you? Think about the last conversation you had with somebody who was struggling. Did you listen to understand them, or were you waiting for your turn to speak? And think about the last time you made a mistake. Did you say, "I was wrong"? Or did you immediately begin explaining why it was not really your fault? That is where the real examination begins, not with the label, with the pattern. If you want to take this kind of self-examination further, keep a simple journal for the next 7 days. Write down the moments when you felt ignored, criticized, disrespected, inferior, or unfairly treated. Then write down what you actually did. That record will tell you more than a flattering description of your personality ever will. I will not bring this up again. 5 hidden signs. Number 1, you monopolize conversations. Start with your conversations. This is one of the easiest behaviors to observe because you do not need anybody else's diagnosis. You simply need to pay attention. When somebody tells you a story, do you let them finish? When somebody describes a problem, do you ask questions about their experience? When they express an emotion, do you stay with that emotion, or do you quickly bring the conversation back to yourself? I know exactly what you mean. That happened to me too. You think that is bad? Listen to what happened to me. You may genuinely be trying to connect, but watch the pattern. A healthy conversation has movement. You speak, they speak. You listen, they listen. You respond to what they actually said. A narcissistic conversational pattern can become one way. The other person becomes an audience. You become the subject. And even when you listen, you may only be waiting for an opportunity to prove your point. Here is the test. The next time someone tells you something important, do not tell your own story immediately. Ask 2 questions about theirs, then listen. That is it. No comparison, no correction, no me too story. Just listen. If that feels surprisingly difficult, pay attention to that feeling. The limitation is important. Talking a lot does not make you narcissistic. Being enthusiastic does not make you narcissistic. Some people are simply talkative. The issue is whether you consistently make other people's experiences secondary to your own. And that brings us to the second sign. Number 2, you feel superior when your status rises. Imagine you get promoted, you earn more money, you become more attractive, you gain followers, you become more successful. Something changes. But watch what happens next. Do you simply become grateful for the opportunity? Or do you start seeing other people differently? Do you become less patient with people you consider unsuccessful? Do you believe your opinions deserve more weight because your position is higher? Do you start treating ordinary rules as things meant for ordinary people? That is where superiority becomes important. The problem is not achievement. Achievement is not evidence of narcissism. The problem is when achievement becomes evidence in your mind that you are fundamentally better than other people. You do not just think, I succeeded. You begin thinking, people like me deserve more. And then something subtle happens. The world divides into people who matter and people who do not. That is the danger. Number 3, you think the rules are for other people. Now examine your relationship with rules. You stop at a red light when there's a police officer nearby. But what happens when nobody is watching? You expect other people to respect your time, but do you respect theirs? You expect loyalty, but do you excuse your own disloyal behavior when you have a good reason? You expect honesty, but do you bend the truth when telling the truth would damage your image? This is where entitlement becomes visible. A narcissistic pattern can sound like this. The rule is ridiculous. They would understand if they knew my situation. I deserve an exception. I have earned the right. One exception proves nothing. Everybody breaks rules sometimes. The question is whether you believe rules should consistently apply to other people while your circumstances somehow make you exempt. And there is a simple way to test this. When you want an exception, ask yourself, would I accept this behavior if somebody else did exactly the same thing to me? If the answer is no, stop there. You have found something worth examining. Number 4, you can dish out criticism, but you cannot take it. Now we get to the uncomfortable one, criticism. You tell your friend that they are making terrible decisions. You tell your partner what they need to change. You tell your coworker how they should have handled the project. You can see everybody else's flaws with remarkable clarity. Then someone turns around and criticizes you. What happens? Do you listen, or do you attack the critic? You are just jealous. You always do this. You are one to talk. You do not understand what I was dealing with. Notice what just happened. The conversation stopped being about whether the criticism was accurate. It became a battle over who had the right to criticize whom. That is the defensive move, and it can happen incredibly fast. A person can receive one small piece of feedback and experience it as a threat to their entire identity. The solution is not to accept every criticism as truth. Some criticism is unfair. Some criticism is cruel. Some criticism is simply wrong. But there is a difference between saying that criticism is inaccurate and becoming consumed with destroying the person who delivered it. Here is your test. The next time someone criticizes you, do not answer immediately. Ask, is there even 10% of this that is true? If there is, deal with that 10%. That is emotional strength. Number 5, you blame others because shame feels unbearable. Now we reach the deepest sign. Think about a mistake you made recently. Not a theoretical mistake, a real one. Something you regret. Something that made you look foolish. Something that hurt another person. What happened inside you? Did you think, I made a mistake? Or did your mind immediately begin constructing a defense? They pushed me into it. They should have known better. I only reacted that way because they made me do it. Blame can be protective. And underneath certain narcissistic patterns, there can be something much more fragile than arrogance: shame. If admitting that you were wrong makes you feel worthless, humiliated, exposed, or fundamentally defective, then accepting responsibility can feel dangerous. So the mind moves the blame somewhere else. Not because the person necessarily wants to be cruel, because admitting fault feels unbearable. That distinction matters. But the effect on other people can still be damaging. You hurt someone. Then you make them responsible for your behavior. You lose control. Then you make somebody else responsible for your reaction. You fail. Then you explain why the circumstances made failure impossible to avoid. And if you cannot shift the blame, the shame comes back. That can create a vicious cycle. Mistake, shame, defensiveness, blame, temporary relief, then another mistake, and the cycle begins again. 2 honest words here. Self-awareness is not self-hatred. If you discover that you have behaved badly, the goal is not to punish yourself. The goal is to become capable of saying 4 words. I was wrong. I am sorry. That is not weakness. That is responsibility. Now you may be thinking, wait, I do some of these things. Does that mean I am a narcissist? No. And this distinction matters. First objection. I talk about myself a lot. That alone means almost nothing. You may be enthusiastic. You may be anxious. You may simply be social. The question is whether you can make room for someone else's experience. Second objection. I hate criticism. Most people hate criticism. The question is what you do with it. Can you eventually consider it? Can you admit when it is fair? Can you apologize? Or must you destroy the credibility of anyone who points out a flaw? Third objection. I sometimes break rules. So does almost everybody. The issue is not perfection. The issue is entitlement. Do you believe the same standards apply to you that you demand from everybody else? Those distinctions matter because narcissism exists on a spectrum of traits, while narcissistic personality disorder is a clinical diagnosis. You should not diagnose yourself from 5 signs in a YouTube video, but you can use 5 signs to become more honest about your behavior. And that is far more useful. Now think about why these patterns are so difficult to change. There is no conspiracy here. Nobody has to secretly teach you how to avoid responsibility. Your own mind can reward you for doing it. Blame makes you feel better immediately. Defensiveness protects your image immediately. Being the center of attention gives you validation immediately. Feeling superior gives you relief from feeling inferior. And that is the trap. The behavior can produce a short-term reward while creating a long-term cost. You win the argument, you lose intimacy. You protect your image, you lose trust. You avoid admitting fault, you become harder to live with. You defend yourself against criticism, and eventually, people stop giving you honest feedback. That is when the problem becomes especially dangerous, because now you have surrounded yourself with people who tell you what you want to hear. The ego wins, the person loses. And there is no industry required to create that cycle. The human brain is perfectly capable of maintaining it by itself. Now I want you to take this somewhere deeper. Imagine being in a relationship where nobody can tell you that you hurt them. Imagine being a parent who cannot apologize to their child. Imagine being a friend who always needs to be right. Imagine being a leader who punishes anyone who disagrees. Eventually, something disappears. Trust. Not because you intended to destroy it, because people learn that your feelings are safer than their honesty. They learn that telling you the truth will become an argument. They learn that your disappointment matters more than their pain. They learn that your mistakes need explanations while theirs need consequences. And slowly, they become quiet. That is the part worth fearing. Not the label narcissist, the silence around you. Because the most important question is not, do I have narcissistic traits? It is, can the people closest to me safely tell me when I am wrong? If the answer is no, something needs to change. And you do not need a diagnosis to start changing it. So here's what I want you to do. For the next 7 days, watch yourself. When someone speaks, notice whether you listen or redirect the conversation towards yourself. When you succeed, notice whether you become grateful or superior. When a rule inconveniences you, notice whether you believe you deserve an exception. When somebody criticizes you, wait before defending yourself. And when you make a mistake, practice saying, I was wrong. Do not score yourself. Do not diagnose yourself. Observe yourself. And when you catch one of these behaviors, do not immediately hate yourself for it. Ask what happened immediately before it. What were you feeling? Ignored? Embarrassed? Inferior? Threatened? Ashamed? That question may tell you more than the behavior itself. By next week, you may not have become a different person, but you will know yourself better. And that is where change starts. Tell me in the comments which of these 5 behaviors you recognized most strongly in yourself, and what usually happens immediately before you do it. And if someone in your family taught you a simple lesson about apologizing, listening, handling criticism, or admitting when you were wrong, share that too. Those small lessons about character are exactly the kind of knowledge people lose when nobody passes them on. And there is another psychological pattern I want you to examine next. It looks like confidence from the outside. It sounds like independence. It can even look like strength. But underneath it is a behavior that can quietly destroy relationships while convincing you that everybody else is the problem. It starts with a sentence that sounds harmless. I do not need anyone. The problem is what that sentence can sometimes be hiding. And once you understand what is underneath it, you may never hear that sentence the same way again. Tonight, before you judge somebody else, watch yourself for one moment. Listen a little longer. Apologize a little faster. And remember, the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.